Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural as well as the latest episode of Legacies. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Legacies. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supernatural. So very interesting episode, obviously picking up, we're last week's episode left off with Dean with his whole plan of how he's going to get rid of Michael. And it's kind of interesting because for him, it's like, he has a nightmare about it to the point that like he was scratching at the box in the, in his dream, and he wakes up and he looks at the wall. He was scratching at it to the point his nails were bleeding. It's actually kind of interesting because I made the comparison last episode, but it does kind of make you think of like the cell that Lucifer and Michael were in with Sam, and it seems like almost exactly like that because it's like Dean's afraid, because it's like it's one thing to kind of like he is afraid of it. He's like, I never said I wasn't scared, but the fact of the matter is I kind of have to do it. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like if need be, Michael probably could do that. He'd probably like, oh, you want to punish me by making me? It's like, I mean, to be fair, that would probably give him all eternity to like torture Dean, play tricks on his mind and his head. I mean, hell, he could even probably be like, oh, you thought I'd be bothered by this? I'll take refuge in your head and leave you out here to possess the body, staying here trapped the entire time. That might be what that nightmare is alluding to. That might be actually, foreshadowing potentially his future. Like, I mean, it's all connected because I'm sure, like, obviously it's meant for Michael, but it's just as much of a prison for Dean as it is him. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. But he's so willing to just, because it's like, yeah, there's literally no other way. This is the only way Billy's presented towards us. And the fact of the matter is, you have, him not even telling Jack or Cassio. It turns out Sam had to be the one to do it just because, Dean's like, oh, I'm just not very good at goodbyes, which is like, yeah, that's him. He just has a hard time really, because it's just, because he doesn't see any other way. And I guess it's kind of dickish to do something like that to people who are family, to not let them know what you're planning. But to be fair, like I said, Cassio still knows, and because Sam told him, and they're trying to find some other way. But they even worked with Rowena. Apparently even she couldn't find a way to kind of go around this situation. Now, something kind of popped up in my head when this is all said and done. I'm skipping around here, but one solution part of me wonders is it going to be, I'll talk about the other one later on, but the first one in my mind is like, could Jack be the answer? I mean, Jack, being the Nephilim that he is powerful enough to handle like an archangel. I don't know how you'd go about that, because it's interesting because it's like, oh, what would happen if they ripped, Michael out of him? Michael did say like, oh, he'd be flesh and bone. I'm like, is that kind of referencing he'll end up like Nick? Because Nick's like, ever since Lucifer left him, he's felt off. Like, there's still residuals of like Lucifer there. Like something changed inside of him because of Lucifer. And it's like, would the same thing happen to Dean? Would Dean kind of be just a little bit off in some shape or form? That's what I'm kind of thinking. Because I mean, it seems like Michael might have been referencing that when he said just flesh and bone in that regard. But we'll see. Or maybe it's just the fact of the matter is, if you did that, like, literally rip me from Dean in some shape or form, it'd most likely kill him, or at the very least leave him in a state where he can't be helped. I don't know. I guess like the whole Nick situation, him and Lucifer, I guess that was kind of like a Hail Mary. Just like it just happened to work out in that situation, that exact circumstances most likely couldn't be replicated. But part of me wonders is like, could it be like using Jack's power? Because obviously he has access to, his powers. He just has to burn away pieces of his own soul to do it. And will that ultimately be what's necessary to save Dean in all of this? Because once again, I know Jack is going to use his powers, even though he says he's not going to. If the time comes for it, if it means protecting the people he cares about, of course he'll burn away his soul, So, I mean, part of me also wonders, like, obviously Lucifer's there in the empty, but it's like, will it play in some shape or form in dealing with Michael? Because I feel like maybe, I don't know, like if you killed Michael inside of Dean, and then like would the empty come and get it, and then if you could save Dean before then, could that potentially be a workaround? Kind of similar to what happened with Lucifer and Nick. It's like you saved Nick's life afterwards because Nick kind of took over after Lucifer died, because when he died, the empty just came swooped up his soul, his essence as an angel, and pulled him in and just like left Nick there. So that potentially could be a route we go on, and maybe, like I said, maybe Jack will play some role in that. Maybe Jack's situation could be, a different solution altogether. So there's that. What's really interesting, this episode, you kind of have this serial killer going down, but it's like he's speaking in the same language that a prophet does, and then it turns out he is the prophet. Like, Tony's supposed to be the next prophet, but Donatello is actually still alive. In the long run, it's kind of interesting because you find out that Donatello had basically, because he's trapped between life and death, it kind of caused an imbalance of some sort, and basically Tony being the next prophet kind of tuned into that frequency, because basically Donatello's mind as a prophet was trying to like reorganize everything, like from the word of God. Like, he was trying to reorganize everything, kind of like compartmentalize it to a certain degree, and just Tony just happened to tap into it, and it was just so messed up and distorted because he's reorganizing it all in his head, and his head's kind of, obviously he's not in the best condition right now. So with his body being in the condition it is, like, it can't organized in a proper way, so everything was a little jumbled. That's why everything came out a little warped towards Tony, and he kind of did the terrible things that he did, even to the point he killed himself just because he thought he was doing God's will, essentially. So, because it did seem like he was almost sacrificing them, and not because every time he'd look up and like extend his arms out, so like he was praying or making a sacrifice or something. But it's like, oh, he thought he was doing literally God's work, which is kind of it's sad in the end that things kind of played out like that. So. But luckily, Cassio showing up as a doctor, that was interesting. Doctor Winchester, other Mr. Winchester, doctor, that whole day. But he was able to reach Donatello, and I love that conversation. Like, oh, what's happened? And then Dean's like, yeah, Cassio explained everything. I'm like, ooh, yeah. And you see the look on Cassio's face, like, oh, shit. Because they're like, yeah, Cassio's going to have to explain everything that he did to Donatello. Which, that in itself is kind of my other thought about a potential solution. I mean, there's no angel tablet to read, but part of me wonders, it's like, could he, maybe there's something in the Word of God that would, I feel like if anything or anyone's going to know a lot about archangels, is going to be like, a prophet of God, so. But it's also interesting too, because it's like, Dean's like, yeah, he is back to being himself, right? It's like, no more evil Donatello. It's like, well, I mean, somewhat normal, because, I mean, he still doesn't have a soul, and Dean's like, that's, not everyone, no one's perfect, which is kind of interesting, because I was like, the way he was acting at first, I'm like, oh, did somehow he get his soul back? It's like, right, once your soul is kind of devoured by, because it was by God's sister, so when she took your soul, it's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of going forever. There ain't no getting that back. They haven't really shown. Is Sam the only person in this entire series that's lost their soul and got it back? I mean, his soul was kind of in a different situation, and even when he got it back, it was super mangled. But nevertheless, it was kind of like Lucifer and Michael's punching bag for such a long time, so. But this was kind of a very heart-to-heart episode, too, in a regard, because, like, Dean had accepted his fate, and just kind of like, it is what it is, like, the fact of the matter. But, Sam and Cassio kept pushing, because for Cass, it's like, the fact of the matter is, I'm going to go try my hardest to save Donatello, to find some sparks. You know why? Because you taught me that, to not give up, but the fact of the matter is, and that's what pissed Sam off, because it's like, after everything we've been through, he even had Dean apologizing for stuff when they were younger. He's like, oh, I wasn't always there for you, and Sam's like, dude, you were literally the only one who literally was there for me, because you practically raised me on your own. But it's like, yeah, things between me and Dad. The fact is, when I left, I hope you never thought like, hey, that was, me just bailing on you. It's like, no, when Dad got super pissed at me, he sent me away. And Sam's like, we're literally not going to have this heart to heart in the sense of you making these deathbed apologies. It's like, you're telling me to focus, and kind of get what's done, needs to get done. We'll leave it at that. But when it's all said and done, like I said, for Sam, it's like, you're giving up. We don't give up. That's what's gotten him to this point in the series, is like, they've never given up on each other. And for Sam, it's like, you're giving up now. It's like, I have always had faith in this. I still have faith in us, like, finding some way. We might not find it today, but we might find it tomorrow, but we'll never know if you're going today and that there is no tomorrow for you. The fact of the matter is, they've triumphed time and time again when it seemed like there was no other way. The example I keep going back to is like the Mark of Cain. There was like supposed to be no way around it, but they found a way because Sam didn't want to give up, wasn't willing to give up, and it inspired Dean not to give up. And it seems like that kind of happened in this, because it's like, Dean's like, yeah, okay, I believe in us. I believe in all of us. So he's like, I'll keep believing in all of us until I can, until there is absolutely no other way. But when the time comes, you have to let me go. And so, because I am curious, like, if anyone's going to break destiny and change fate, it's going to be the Winchesters. But the question then becomes, like, will it really go down the way they think it is? Also, does Billy know more than she lets on? Because Billy's always kind of known more, because she was always talking about the fact that the matter is leaving Dean around because she knew what laid out before him. So it's like, I mean, to be fair, everything in Dean's book changed because of the whole Michael thing. But I still feel like we still never found, is Michael the thing that Billy was like, oh yeah, like Dean's important to the grand scheme of things. Like, maybe this was meant to happen, that there is some grand design to all of this. I have no idea. But that does beg the question, like, what is going to happen? I think when it's all said and done, either Sam's going to try to and it doesn't work, or Sam just has reluctancy to do it. But I think when it's all said and done, Michael is going to get control and not get locked up in a box. I'm also curious about it too. We haven't seen her in a while since we got the spear from her, obviously, but where's Dark Kaya? That whole situation, because she was actually trying to find a way back to her own world. Obviously, there was the whole lies and everything about, letting that happen, but I mean, she might end up tracking them down to do that, because the only person who could potentially take her back is Jack. And Jack does have his powers now and everything. I mean, granted, he'd have to burn off his own soul, and I'm sure everyone wouldn't be too happy about him doing that. But that way is there open now, too. But like I said, Donatello's back, so there's no telling what that will ultimately, lead to in that regard. In the grand scheme of things, I'm very excited to see, what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. Like, is there more to this, situation with Michael? Or is it just going to be a situation where the Winchesters just surprise us and find a way when there supposedly is no way? We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so really quickly, I also got to add in something I completely forgot to talk about. So I referenced it a little bit earlier, but there's the whole like Nick/Lucifer side of things in this episode I completely forgot to talk about. And that was the whole situation where he actually went back home after he escaped and everything. I was actually thinking like, oh, when he got arrested last episode, I was like, oh, maybe that's the last we'll kind of see of Nick. He'll just kind of spend the rest. It's like, no, we're far from done with that. So it's kind of interesting. He ends up going back home, and I think this speaks volumes of just how messed up Nick is. When he sees his wife's ghost, the first thing out of his mouth is Lucifer. It's like, I mean, it makes sense because the first time he met Lucifer looked like his wife, so sure. But at the same time, it's like, that's where you first go to? I mean, I feel like you'd be more well-versed in the supernatural. It's a ghost and everything, so why wouldn't you automatically think it's your wife? Even she had to be like, no, it's me, your wife. So he's like, no, don't worry about it. I got justice for you. The fact of the matter is you can move on now. I killed the demon that's responsible. She's like, but it's not just that. You're my unfinished business too, because I saw what happened between you and Lucifer. The fact of the matter is you submitted to Lucifer. He's like, no, he chose me. She's like, no, you chose him. Because essentially he gave in so easily. So it maybe, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't necessarily what Lucifer did to him, but maybe, I mean, to be fair, it's like everything was orchestrated to turn him into a perfect host. I guess it was like the whole thing of like, well, not perfect host, but a good enough host until he got to Sam. That was kind of the whole plan anyway. But I guess like to break him enough that he was desperate, kind of come to him in a vulnerable moment. So you kind of feel like, oh, that wasn't 100% on Nick, but everything he's done subsequently since, he can't blame it on just like, oh, Lucifer's no longer in him. And so, I mean, to be fair, like, once again, I guess maybe that also comes down to the whole difference in the situation, but it's like Sam's had Lucifer inside of him and it hasn't changed him to that degree. I guess you can make the same argument, maybe the same thing about Castiel too. Castiel had him as well, but neither one of them has been altered in the same fashion. Because I brought that up earlier about like maybe that potentially could end up happening to Dean, but it's like Sam and Castiel haven't really changed. But I guess maybe you could make the argument some of the stuff they might have done, maybe even doing Castiel's whole situation of like, oh, how he handled the Donatello situation. Not in this episode, but what led to Donatello being in the condition that he's in now. It justified the means type of mentality that Castiel had before. So maybe you can make the argument that kind of rubbed off there, but I feel like none of them have had this extreme reaction that, Nick has. I guess you could also think like maybe a piece of his soul faded away when he died, or, when Lucifer died and took a part of his soul. Nevertheless, but the thing is she's like, okay, if that's really true, just forget about Lucifer then. And he can't. Even when it's all said and done, knowing that literally his wife is doomed to walk this earth, she's eventually going to turn into a full-blown vengeful spirit because you did this. Like, I mean, it's like, that's shitty. Like, the woman that you love, that you did all this for, it's like, no. Now, it kind of, in retrospect, it's like, you didn't do this for them. You did this for yourself. I mean, he even admitted it. It's like, he's like, yeah, I kind of just wanted an excuse to do all that terrible stuff. And it's like, now your wife is literally going to be stuck wandering this world conscious, like, I'm damned and so are you. But now he's not even bothered about her. He immediately just walks off and she's like, what the hell? It's kind of interesting because we never see ghosts 100% like that. But most times when we meet ghosts, they're usually in a vengeful spirit mode. So to see them kind of like, in her case, like so calm, cool and collected, trying to talk and just, I want to move on. Because she hasn't been, well, she has been dead for a couple years because basically she's been watching ever since Lucifer took over him. So she's been there for the past, 8 years? Because that was back in season 5 when Nick got possessed. Not 8 to 9 years she's been a ghost, roughly speaking. So and that was just kind of interesting. And just like the fact of the matter, once again, all he cares about is getting Lucifer back. So that might be tied into what ends up happening. Once again, like, we have not peeked back into the empty and saw Lucifer since we saw, like, that time Nick, whatever it is, it does seem like him and Nick do have a strong enough connection. Maybe it goes all the way back, because let's not forget Crowley did some crap to make it so that Lucifer couldn't pick any other body. So maybe some of that kept some of that connection between them strong enough. Maybe it's not that whatever Crowley did to his body isn't completely gone, and so now their bond is forever bound together. So rather, Sam originally was supposed to be the perfect host for him, but maybe Nick ultimately might not have been the one, but maybe Nick will become the perfect host for him, or whatever the case may be. I mean, we might even see something shift going forward where we see, like, will we see Nick completely disappear? Will we see Nick overtake Lucifer's personality, or will we see them kind of bounce back and forth potentially? I have no idea. That depends on what they ultimately end up doing with the whole Lucifer situation. Because I think that speaks volume, because the only reason why, Castiel was able to wake up was because of Jack and his Nephilim abilities. But then again, it's like, well, Lucifer is an archangel, so... But to be fair, the way as powerful as the empty is, I mean, to be fair, we haven't really seen it go up against archangels, but this thing's ancient and powerful. Like, this thing's been there since the beginning, so I feel like even an archangel wouldn't be able to do anything. But the fact is that Nick was able to reach him like that, I think just shows how strong of a bond they have. So that's just kind of interesting. Like I said, I do apologize that I'm kind of tackling this on an end, but it literally didn't hit me till later. I was like, right, I completely forgot about talking about that angle of things. So. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legacies, a very interesting episode. In this episode, I thought it was kind of neat. Basically, we're dealing with a monster that can infiltrate your dreams. At first, it's kind of like, oh, it's a night hag. And I like that, because the moment the night hag showed up, I was like, oh, it's kind of like Freddy Krueger. And then MG's like, oh, so this thing's like Freddy Krueger. I'm like, thank you. It's a situation where it's like they don't shy away from like, oh, yeah, pop culture exists in this universe, in the sense of like, oh yeah, MG knew exactly what zombies were, and also knows what Freddy Krueger is. Even their like way of dealing with it, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna grab this thing and pull out in the real world. Oh, like Freddy Krueger, because it's like I said, because even my mind went there immediately, because it's like when you're like, oh, so I'm invading your dreams, like Freddy Krueger's like the number one. I'm sure there's things that have existed in mythology that predate Freddy Krueger, but he's like the number one pop culture thing about infiltrating dreams, and you die in your dreams, you die in real life type of situation. So, but I like that they do that, because it's just a whole thing. It's interesting, and it's always nice, because not everything does that whole thing of like, oh yeah, like there's a pop culture thing that exists that deals with this exact situation, but we're not going to reference it because we're going to pretend like it does. I guess it kind of gets in that area of like, if you acknowledge that, like there's not... I guess because this show is what it is, so it's kind of like, oh, we can do that. We can acknowledge that these things exist in pop culture and use them to our benefits to fight the monsters that we're fighting. Nevertheless, it's kind of interesting. Everyone's got their different dreams, because when Landis came up, I'm like, yours is literally worrying about failing your tests and stuff like that. You're literally showing up into class in your underwear. I was like, I get it, but now it's like, oh no, because that's a big deal for Landis, because Landis' whole fear is like not fitting in anywhere. So it's like, for him, that's like the most traumatic thing ever. But everyone else is kind of like, even part of Raphael's was him getting hit by a belt by one of her foster fathers. That sucked ass. Like, that was just shitty. But also, another side of it was the whole Hope situation. And I love every time I was like, what else happened in your dream? And he would avoid it like the plague. And then essentially kind of find out why later on. Because even later on, Landon's like, yo, so what was Hope doing in your dream? Funny enough, that's literally the title episode. I like that they do that. This show, if you never noticed that or don't know, this show, literally the titles of every episode, it's a line from the show. Some shows do that, but not every show does. It's just kind of an interesting thing how that kind of works out like that sometimes. I feel like not every show does that. Some might, but still, like I don't know how like much the percentage is, but nevertheless, he was just kind of like, no, there's her being a badass because for him he didn't want to tell like Landon about like, oh yeah, Hope is kissing on me in a dream and stuff like that, because for him it's like obviously it's the night hag, which later on we find out it's not the night hag, but I'll get to that in a second. We know it, it's just like it's playing on your fears, and a big fear of Raphael's is not protecting Landon, and I think there is some part of him that kind of has a thing for Hope just because of like the bond they've created, but I think it's a situation of like his greatest fear was like, oh no, like I'm hurting Landon in some shape or form. And so for him, he was kind of telling Hope at the end of it, being like, me and you, we can't have these like intimate, like close bond talks like that, because it's like, because for him, it's like straight up, if you're going to be with Landon and you're not feeling the same way anymore, then like tell him straight up. Don't kind of string him along. Essentially, you're just gonna kind of hurt him in the long run. But for her, it's like obviously she's lying because she's trying to protect him. But it's like, have you ever done that? And Raphael was kind of like, no, but in actuality, he has, because apparently the one of his foster parents that burned him with cigarettes, Landon's. Raphael found the guy and beat the crap out of him, but he never told Landon because he knew Landon would never be a part of that. And so now he understands like whatever it is that Hope's doing and trying to protect him from. Landon was Raphael was like, I'm a hypocrite about it. So, but just to prevent himself from being a hypocrite, like for one, it's like I will lie and do whatever it takes if it means protecting Landon. But for him, it's like, if there is another way I have to protect Landon, and that's not, because he can be hurt other ways, and that's with a broken heart. So I think that also gave, Hope a lot to think about, too, because the entire episode she was kind of avoiding him and everything like that. To the point, obviously Landon could notice it, but, because every time she's around Landon, it's a reminder that like, oh crap, like I'm keeping this big secret from him. Because for her, it's like, if he found out about his mom, it's something that he's going to deal with for the rest of his life. Because, losing her mom is such a fresh wound. I mean, a lot of people don't handle losing their parents well. I mean, it's actually kind of interesting. I didn't even think about making this comparison, but Caroline's like the greatest example of like, we saw what she did when she lost her mom. She cut off her humanity and things went sour. But, I think Hope isn't handling it the best way, but she's definitely handling it better than especially being as young as she is too, in that regard. So it's just kind of a situation of like losing someone like that, especially in Hope's case, because she not only lost her mom, she lost her dad too. And so she wants to prevent Landon from ever feeling that, because it's like, not only does he not remember meeting his mom, he also lost her. So it's like, now he doesn't even, like, it's not like, oh, she's gone, but at least I had that time with her, all those memories. It's like, all of that is gone. That time he spent with her, like, all that's gone. So he has literally nothing to remember her by, because he doesn't even have the picture anymore either. So it's kind of like, it'd be an even heavier heart, because at the very least, Hope, it comes with pain and stuff like that, memories, but at the very least, she still remembers her mom and her dad. She still has memories of them. Yes, there's bad memories, but there's also good ones too, and she has those memories in general, so that was just kind of an interesting thing to think about. I love when Alaric was like, oh, I found it, because he was like, yeah, I found it in a closet, a safe in your closet with the Michelson crest on it. I'm like, isn't that a little suspicious to have the crest on it? Like, that's going to be a big dead giveaway, isn't it? And then she's like, the fact of the matter is, you're human, you're fallible. And he's like, yeah, but I've been, kicking supernatural ass way before you were born. And then I stopped for a second. I was like, right, you have, haven't you? Because I forgot, because like this universe has been time skipping all over the place. Like, Hope wasn't even born with all the, it's so weird to think about that. Just because all the time skipping and stuff that this, like I said, this universe has done. It's kind of interesting to think about. Right, that was long before Hope was even born, dude. That's crazy. But nevertheless, I mean, I'm just talking within the confines of the show. Obviously, he was doing his thing even before we got introduced to him into the, in the Vampire Diaries way back in the day, so I was like, oh man, that's interesting. Like the moment he was in the car and everything, I knew he fell asleep the moment he went by leaving, Mystic Falls. When he came across that sign the second time, I'm like, oh, he fell asleep in the car. I figured that's what was going to happen. I was like, don't turn the music off, keep it on. But then he passed the sign. I was like, oh yeah, he fell asleep. It actually surprised me that he actually fell asleep in the school. Like he never got into the car and left. I was like, oh man, that's really interesting. But I mean, he quickly picked up on it though. But it is actually kind of interesting when you actually break it down and look at everybody's nightmares. Caleb's was really interesting because his is even though he acts like he has so much pride in vampires, there's still a part of him that's afraid of being one of them. Because once again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, in this universe, vampires are the most despised thing. I guess even Caleb on some level realizes how destructive vampires can be. I'm curious, is this born because of his, discovery, Dorian talking to him about MG and Rippers? It's actually kind of interesting. I'll quickly kind of go on this tangent. Well, I'll finish my thought. I wonder, did that kind of set it off in Caleb's mind of oh crap, vampires kind of have a much deadlier side to them than I kind of gave them credit for. I thought oh, you've eaten some people, you kind of let them go, you do it. I mean, obviously they're not knowing about the Michelsons and how much havoc they cause over the 1,000 years that they've been around, but even the short amount of time Damon and Stefan were around causing enough damage, so that's saying, so it's just kind of interesting him having that perspective. But the thing is, when MG was reading his, writing his report or whatever, and then I didn't read the book fast enough, and Caleb was like, yo, you can't be doing that to Big D. I was like, Big D. I was like, wait, Damon? Is that wait, are you writing about Damon and stuff like that? But it's no, it was about Dracula, because basically MG's taking a very, I guess a very feminist approach to it, in the sense of being oh yeah, Dracula being part of the patriarchy, that type of thing. So that's what that whole thing ended up being. I was like, oh, okay, never mind. I just assumed it's Big D. I'm like, Big D, they're at the Salvatore school. Damon, is that what that's all about? I should have figured as much, because even Caleb had brought up the Salvatore brothers before. He didn't even really call them by name or even go Stefan or Damon. He was just kind of oh yeah, those Salvatore dudes or something like that. So it's not like he's on a first name basis when it comes to knowing them. But nevertheless, the other nightmare was kind of interesting. That being MG's kind of going back to the whole him being a Ripper, and then Raphael's being the fact is hurting someone. I guess it's both his werewolf side of things, but also his human side of things, are just the whole Hope situation of two different ways of hurting people. But I didn't talk about it, but I did like the fact is that this supernatural creature isn't what it actually pretended to be. It's it's not even a night hag. It's, what was it? An Henri. It's basically a demon bat shape-shifting thing that basically disguises itself as something else, so you wouldn't know that it would know how to defeat it. That thing's scarier than I thought it would. I thought it was going to, it looks like a bat, but I wasn't expecting it to kind of have a humanoid form like that. Sorry. So that was kind of interesting. But what I also really liked about this episode too was kind of this heart-to-heart that Landon had with Hope. I thought was kind of cute, where he's just kind of I've literally faced my fears today. So what do I have to be afraid of? He's I'm not afraid of losing you anymore, Hope. The fact that matters, I'm gonna fight tooth and nail for you. You might be thinking, maybe you've changed your mind about us, boyfriend and girlfriend, but then he's kind of I'll, keep going until I'm able to change your mind back into, wanting us to be something more. And it's even if you have to lie, to keep your secrets, you have to carry this burden because you're the only one strong enough to carry it alone. Okay, you do what you need to do. You keep your secrets, but, I'm going to keep going until I'm someone that you can rely on and confide in. And he says this thing of I will always fight to find you. And to me, immediately, it made me kind of think, it kind of reminds me of Always and Forever, for, the Michelsons. And it kind of seemed I don't know if that's what they're going for in that regard, but it made me feel kind of a reminiscence of it. Also, the whole Caleb, MG, and Landon, little, beatboxing, guitar, rap part, that was pretty sick. I also love it, like, yeah, like, I love when it was kind of like Landon, it's like, I'm not going anywhere without Hope, and you know, Hope's like, I'm not surprised, but then Raphael's like, I'm not going anywhere without Landon, and MG's like, as the leader of the super squad, I have to stay, and you know, and then you have Caleb's like, if MG's not going anywhere, I have to stay, so it's like, and also Landon and Caleb are now officially part of the super squad, yeah, so that's pretty dope, so that's very interesting. Obviously the urn's still there, but that means it's interesting because it's like we can't just let, you know, the 80 or so students just stay somewhere else because of this whole situation. So it's like, how are we going to handle that? It's like, I don't know. Like, they might legitimately, well, I mean, because not everyone there is like even a teenager. There are kids there too. So it's like, what do you do about that? Like, this is an ongoing situation. Are you just going to like do this every time a monster comes here? Because I was about to say, like, not unless you train everybody to fight, but once again, it's like, it's kids. I also love that thing of like Alaric was getting the kids to like make stuff, you know, the witches to help, you know, make everyone stay awake, and he felt so bad about it. But Landon's like, nah, you nowhere. Like the gym teacher or whatever at my old school was literally selling what was it, like cocaine underneath the bleachers or something like that. And then Alaric's like, yeah, thanks, that makes me feel at least a monochrome amount better, you know. So that was just kind of an interesting thing. But what's also interesting is the whole Triad situation, Triad Industries. That dude, apparently, just from the conversation with the security guard, it seemed like he hasn't been working there for like only a couple months yet. He has a password that he probably shouldn't be, because it's, you know, because it's like, oh, like, it seemed like something only top ranking people have. So I'm like, okay, so is that supposed to be like kind of a wink and a nod to the fact that he might be something older than what he claims to be? It's also interesting, since I'm in to talk about this, like, obviously they kind of talk around it, but like the fake Henri pretending to be the Night Hag was like, oh, take it back, we can take it back home, when it was talking to Landon. So obviously it knows he's from Malivore, at least partly, but then it's like, how does it know that? Because nothing else has ever brought up that fact. Well, because I guess nothing at this point in time has ever crossed paths. Well, there was the spider thing, but I guess it just wasn't in a talking mood. But it's like nothing else has ever referenced like Landon being from Malivore up until this point. Like, this thing was like the first thing to ever reference that. So I wonder, can they all sense that? Do they know that? Is there some kind of like energy that comes off of Landon that is reminiscent of them because they came from Malivore? I don't know. That was just kind of interesting to me. Or maybe it's just because it was in his head and kind of already knew what he didn't know. But getting back to what I was saying, it's like, there's a file, because they have backup files and stuff like that, about his mom. And it's like, wait, you went in 20 years ago, yet you just got reabsorbed. But he's not telling anybody. So it's like, why are you keeping that a secret? It seemed like that'd be something you want to tell people. I mean, he got the photo last episode and he kicked the dude in there. So it's like, why is he doing that? Like, is this supposed to be something of like, oh, he's trying to do this on his own? Because if he does, then he gets to enjoy all the rewards himself. Like, is he trying to benefit from this, like, within the group? Or it seemed like he might have ulterior motives. He even tries to track down Landon, go into his foster parents, but they're under a spell, and they're just saying like, oh, him and Raphael were taken in and, you know, adopted by a good family in Virginia. That's literally all they can say, because they're under a spell. So I'm interested to see what that Triad Industry situation ended up being. Like I said, he's not backed up by anyone. He's just handling that by himself. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that goes, as well as this whole Malivore situation, you know, where, you know, Landon stands in all of this, the complicated situation that it kind of puts Raphael in, and what that kind of means for his relationship with Hope, or kind of lack thereof, supposedly going forward to everything. Also, what other monsters are going to find their way to the Salvatore school, and like, how are they going to handle that? I'm very interested to find out what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.